And next speaker is Joonas Nikkanen, project manager and part of the research information and interoperability team at CSC, currently managing development teams on various research information related services. Services, yes. Jungle, yes. Most notably, the National Virta Publication Information Service and Publication Forum portal.
Thank you. And thank you for the organizers to invite me to give a brief update on what we've been doing on Virta's side and related to OpenAIRE as well. That started from the last slide. If we go back a few. So the topic for my presentation is connecting Finnish publication metadata to OpenAIRE. I will be talking briefly on Virta, what it is all about. I'm sure most of you know, or some of you know. 10 little on the context of Finnish publication metadata related to OpenAIRE, and then at the actual case on what we've been doing and what we will be continuing to do on Virta's side. This is quite practical approach or technical approach to what Johan already mentioned in the before lunch on OpenAIRE and what's the situation over there. So this is a tiny part of EOSC in a sense. We are not included in those list of services in that sense, but doing our part as well. But yeah, if we move forward, briefly, as I said, about Virta, some background on Virta in general is that it's used, well, the metadata about publications in Virta is used for the julkaisutiedonkeruu, basically the funding model, the national funding model for Finnish higher education institutions. The criteria, which some of you probably know, this is the, so to say, the old one. The new one was agreed on January this year, and it will include open access as part of the level or the point, so to say, the criteria on which the funding is allocated for the organizations and how many and on what level the publications are included in Virta. And as I said, what we have in Virta, I'll show a picture in a second, is that the organizations, the higher education organizations, provide a copy of their CRIS systems or some other, for example, publication registries to us, and we, in a sense, work as a national data warehouse for that publication metadata. We include metadata on books, journal articles, conference papers, etc., and all scientific fields are represented in that way. So apart from some commercial databases, for example, Web of Science or Scopus, it differs on that level that we try to include as many of those scientific fields as possible to Virta, and this is one of the reasons it differs from those. The data can be examined on a metadata level on Jouli and on statistical level in Vipunen portal, and of course queried via some technical APIs, mainly the REST API, the OIPMH API. To show an overview on what Virta basically is that, as I said, on annual level we get some 60,000 publications, or the metadata on those publications, from a list of organizations on the left side to Virta, and then we deduplicate, etc., to our, so to say, the middleware of publication metadata and the combination of those. And it's exported to different services, for example, Academy of Finland, being one of them on their reporting service. But the main reason, or the reason I'm here, is to talk about OpenAIRE integration, on that we could get the Finnish publication metadata to OpenAIRE via this one point, rather than every organization doing their own integrations to that service. This is the overview on what Virta is, and the arrows mean that publication metadata is moved in some technical format, without going too deeply into that. Shortly on Finnish publication metadata from OpenAIRE's point of view, like Johan mentioned before lunch, at the moment in OpenAIRE we do include, or do indeed have, Finnish publications. I don't know if you can see those, but mainly biggest universities, and then for University of Applied Sciences we have this Theseus repository, which includes publication metadata as well as the full text publications. But this does not include all of the institutional repositories in Finland. So basically that list provides to OpenAIRE as we speak, and then there are missing, I think it says 5 universities from that list, and most of the research institutions as well. I think we have VTT being the only one in the list over there. In addition, what's missing in OpenAIRE at the moment from Finland are the publications that are not archived in these repositories. So basically, if we look at, well, DSpace repositories in Finland, which are the most common, or basically all of them are DSpace based, there is, does this work? Yeah. Comparison on Aalto University's side, that they have in their repository from 2011 to 2017, some 3,000 publications. In their CRIS system, they have 36,000. And that number in Virta is somewhat to 27,000 publications. So mainly we are talking about these that could be imported to OpenAIRE from Virta's integration. I try to be quick, as I know the time is running. There was a survey made by Finnish National Open Access Desk, or basically these people. Okay, good. By the Finnish NOAD, the University of Helsinki Library, which was done last year. And we, or they, there's a summary link over there. But basically it said that most of the repositories in Finland answered to that, and I think it was half of the current providers to OpenAIRE, or half of the repositories who answered are providers to OpenAIRE as we at the moment, or at the moment of the survey, and the rest of them were thinking about doing the OpenAIRE integration, but there were various things which at that time were obstacles to the integration. Most of them said, or half of them said, that they will be harvestable in the few years' time, but some didn't have any schedule at all for that. And many of them, 5 out of 7, mentioned that the technical implementation process was rather cumbersome, in a sense that there are no resources on repository side to actually do that. And this was the starting point on implementing or providing Finnish metadata from Virta to OpenAIRE. Some of the reasons are listed there, mainly because it's more wise to do that integration in one place rather than do that on every repository and every CRIS system in Finland. And in a way, the centralized solution would work more well and save resources in university level or the research institution level or so on. And this way we could expose more of the Finnish publication metadata to OpenAIRE, and that way into EOSC as well, or the umbrella of EOSC, which would benefit the whole of Finland and the research done here to get more exposed to that way. And then, of course, we could get better quality metadata out of the CRIS systems and out of Virta than the repositories, which in many or do not are not that way interoperable with the CRIS systems and the repositories in the organizations. A bit of the timeline on the implementation process. We started it last year on planning on how to do this. Currently we are, I think, over here. We've done most of the technical part, and we are being, or our API endpoint is being validated at OpenAIRE's side, and we are asking for the research organization to provide us a permit to actually push or tear publication metadata to OpenAIRE. And hopefully next quarter we'll have the first harvests from OpenAIRE to Virta to be actual in production in that way. As Johan mentioned, there are different guidelines for services who provide to OpenAIRE. On Virta's side, it was wisest to follow the CRIS managers guidelines, which is basically aimed at local or institutional CRIS systems. But Virta being this national aggregator, we follow the same guidelines. There's a bit a somewhat different documentation on what to do and what elements to include in the harvest. From Virta's point of view, we are looking, there are different sets we are looking, and mainly the publication is one of the main one, and then we have person organizational unit funding, which is important part being OpenAIRE. In the past, this was one of the major issues doing the integration to repositories, that the funding information, for example, would be difficult to get to the repository level, and then events. Briefly on how it looks on Virta's side, architecture-wise, is that we provide, I don't know if this is, it tends to get a bit technical on this, but basically we have API or OIPMH API which provides Virta's publication metadata, and OpenAIRE then harvests it from that way. But it's one of the services that use Virta's publication metadata as their source. So in a sense, it was easy for us to actually implement, in a sense that we had many of the technologies in place already. Then there's the issue of metadata and the data models. In Finland, we quite strictly on Virta's side follow the ministry's, or basically the publication metadata model dictated by the ministry on the julkaisutiedon keruu. So, for example, there are some elements which are a bit peculiar on CRIS's point of view, and there were few key differences on that. First, of course, being the publication type classification we use in Finland, the A1, A2, etc. on journal articles and whatnot. But what we basically did was a full mapping of Finnish or the Virta data model to the serif-based data model used in OpenAIRE. It's maintained. Yeah, I think it might be better to wait for the presentation and then click it. It's available at our wiki pages, but basically you can see on how the integration and the data elements are put towards OpenAIRE, and of course see the Virta data model as well for the reference. Some of the lessons learned. It's highly dependent on the system level architecture and the decisions made on technology. Following the OpenAIRE guidelines is rather straightforward. As we talked with Johan earlier today, was that it would be useful to have further support and documentation on for the actual implementers on the technical side even more. I know there are, for example, pure system which is used, for example, at the University of Helsinki. They are working on their system for the OpenAIRE integration as well. But some kind of cooperation on that would be useful. And of course, this, many of you might know it, but aiming for high quality metadata it means a lot of work. For example, having to upkeep the data model mapping, and those tend to get quite complex quite soon. At the moment, we are, as I said, running our endpoint to the OpenAIRE beta infrastructure and currently testing it on our development endpoint. And this is what we are aiming for, to have journal articles and publications put to OpenAIRE from those local CRIS systems all the way to OpenAIRE for people to see them, and of course for wider linking and enriching the metadata on OpenAIRE side. I'm sure there are many other lessons to be learned as we move towards the production phase, which happens next quarter, but we'll see then. And as this is a good place for advertisement, we are holding EuroCRIS membership meeting at the end of May in Espoo or Helsinki. We have side events in Helsinki, main event in Otaniemi. So I encourage you to join us there as well. They are gathering lightning talks from Finnish organizations and research institutions to give at this meeting. It's mostly towards CRIS people and people working on those, but of course everyone's welcome to join us and hear on what's being done at Euro level on CRIS systems. But thank you.
Thank you, Jonas. Questions, comments?
Thank you for your presentation. I would like to know, is there any similar plan for aggregating data to OpenAIRE for datasets?
I think Johan here is better person to talk in a sense. On Finnish or Finland's point of view, I don't think there are at this moment. Of course, like I said, I think the mic is on. Yeah, like I said, organizational CRIS systems might include metadata on datasets, because that's something that is missing on Virta's side. But of course, many of the organizations don't have CRIS systems which are maintained in that point of view.
Hi, Anne-Sonikka Aalto. Just practical question. When you are implementing this Virta integration, we still are using our own integration from our DSpace. So will there be an overlap, or how do you, I suppose you will sort of tell us what to do and at what stage if we want to take this Virta integration into use?
Of course, there will be overlap. And from OpenAIRE's point of view, they have to do a lot of the duplication in a sense that there will be publications, etc. Duplications of publications on OpenAIRE's side, and they are quite prepared on that level that some of the publications will be in OpenAIRE's side already, which are in your CRIS system or your repository in that sense.
So these are all very interesting questions. Regarding the research data sets, I would have the same question to you. So I understand that we still rely on aggregation from data repositories or from DataCite as a main resource for research data sets. The other question about do we still need to expose our content to OpenAIRE from our repositories? I think this is an important question you should coordinate and solve in your country. It concerns the same way also, for instance, the Netherlands, where we mainly harvest from their NARCIS, National Research Information Portal. I support the idea to have a national point of publications where OpenAIRE can collect the information from. But I have two questions about this. OpenAIRE is interested also to collect the full text files if they are open access, and have the proper licenses that allow the reuse. So we need to find a solution for this aspect. But also OpenAIRE provides or aims to provide added value services for repositories, and therefore it's still important that repositories register to OpenAIRE and are compliant. So one example is a user statistics service, for instance.
And one comment to those questions, in a sense, that it's also have to keep in mind that we are aiming to have the research information hub operational in the coming years. So in a sense, that could be used for the OpenAIRE harvest as well, for the data and projects, etc., on grants, for example. So it has to be done somewhat or discussed on a national level and on research information hub level on how to actually do the harvest on this.
Okay, thank you, Jonas.